Hello, and welcome again to Forge Fireside. Fireside is a monthly chat with a founder, investor, entrepreneur, or other individual who has a compelling story to tell that can be of value to our community, to our students, and beyond. My name is Brian Ellerman. I'm the founding executive director of Forge, which is finding opportunities and resources to grow entrepreneurs. We like to work across the community and with students in developing entrepreneurial mindset and imagining a better world where everyone thinks that way. My guest today is Aadil Diwan, the co-founder and CTO of SafKan Health, a medical device company focused on ear care. Welcome, Aadil.
Thanks, Brian. It's good to be with you.
So I always like to start out by asking the origin story, but usually when I say that, I'm talking about college. But your story actually starts even earlier than that. So we're gonna take a change from the usual and tell me a little bit about your childhood and kind of what led you to where you are today, and then we'll veer back to your university days.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you the story. So the story of SafKan Health really started a long time ago. When I was a young kid, I was around 11 or 12 years old. Growing up just outside of Seattle, Washington. When I woke up one morning, regular school day, but I seemed to have a hearing loss in my left ear. And so as any, 11-year-old would do, I told my mom. And so my mom, was a bit concerned. She didn't really know what could be causing my hearing loss in just the one ear. So she gave a call to our primary care doctor close by. Got the first available appointment, took me in, and then when they looked in my ear, they said, everybody take a deep breath. That's not a serious issue here. It's not some sort of permanent damage. He doesn't even have an ear infection. What it was an impaction of cerumen, commonly known as earwax. And it turns out that cerumen impaction is the number one cause of conductive hearing loss. And so that's what I showed up with as a patient, a conductive hearing loss caused by impacted cerumen. And I was an 11-year-old at the time, sitting in the doctor's office. And that was the first time I went through an ear cleaning procedure with an ear and bladder syringe. So that is how the story originated when I was 11 years old. And then we can come back to it as we fast forward 10 years later.
Okay, so you ended up then at the University of Arizona. What did you study? And I doubt it, but did you go to the university thinking I need to do something about this, cerumen story of mine, or were you kind of focusing somewhere else at the time?
Yeah, so growing up, I was always very interested in science, technology, medicine from a young age. And so I'd say in my high school days, I became passionate about medical technology, medical devices, and that's what led me to the major of bioengineering, biomedical engineering. And then around 2013 was when I came to the University of Arizona, moved down to Tucson, started taking my classes there. And around my junior year is when my ear started bothering me again. And so at that time, I was thinking, okay, well, I probably need to go to the local doctor here or the campus health facility to get an ear cleaning done. And by that time, I had really had my foundations of engineering and human anatomy, physiology down. And I decided in my college apartment to try to prototype and build a ear cleaning device for myself. And so that's what I was doing behind the scenes.
My facial expression belies what I'm thinking, which is, so were you experimenting on yourself? Like, were you your own guinea pig in your trial, or how did that work?
In the earliest days, yes. So, I was a student, in my college apartment there near campus, and I had a 3D printer. I had saved up some money. I bought a 3D printer, just had it right there on my table in my bedroom. And designing parts using some SolidWorks CAD, and then printing them out using some off-the-shelf pumps and motors to get the irrigation and suction going in my ear. We can come back to the technology later on in our chat. But yeah, I was really just building prototypes, testing it on myself because I was the original patient. And fun tidbit is, since I built that first prototype, I've never been back to the doctor for the procedure. I've always just done it on myself.
Well, and I definitely want to touch on a little bit about sort of that vision for the future, because I know right now the device is only available with clinicians.
Mm-hmm.
But you provided me a fantastic opportunity to put in a little bit of a programmatic plug for Forge, which is something that unfortunately wasn't around when you were a student. But we have a brand new or expanded program called the Student Startup Residency that will offer the opportunity to up to 30 undergraduate students, probably half of which will come from the biomedical space and especially biomedical engineering. The other half from, say, semiconductor manufacturing or AI.
Yeah.
Those students will get into a program over the summer called a startup boot camp, where they get mentored by experts in these fields. And then at the end of the 8 weeks, they'll pitch to a panel of investors. So they really get that sort of intensive experience of launching a company and mentored through it. Kicker is then we also are going to invite those students to apply to become entrepreneurs in residence with us for the fall, where they serve as industry analysts in different areas, including many parts of biomedicine, and working with founders in our accelerators, working with investor groups, et cetera. So, in other words, that student that's in their dorm room that's 3D printing something, to try to solve it, come talk to us. We've got information sessions starting next week, or well, I should say we have information sessions running, and the applications are open as we speak for students to apply for this.
That's awesome. I think your guys' program is fantastic. As you mentioned, I wish something like this already existed when I was a student many years ago, but it's amazing to see it come together and how you guys are helping the community students. And I'm excited to be part of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Aadil. I will say I would love it if our motto was something like, "I wish we had that when I was a student." Like it's my origin story. I'm a biochemistry, oncogenetics, clinical pathology background. I did not have a Forge when I was in college.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of what I was doing was taking multidisciplinary concepts and putting them together. So I can talk a little bit about the idea and ideation phase of SafKan Health and how it came together, and take you through the next phases of the story, if that's something that interests you.
Yeah, well, I think so. One of the things that we really try to underscore, particularly with the student inventors and innovators in the biomedical space, is this isn't the same as developing a parking app or find the best restaurant or bar. Number one, you're impacting a person in many ways, including their health. There's also a regulatory pathway that governs this. So maybe talk a little bit about, so from your concept and what you had, talk a little bit about sort of how then the device came to be and how you navigated that clinical trial and that regulatory side.
Yeah, so from a higher level, the phases were the idea of the medical device and the technology behind it. Then came the prototype phase, trying to build out those technologies and into the device itself. After the prototypes were built, we moved into clinical studies, multiple clinical studies done with universities as partners. Then we wrapped up all that clinical data, safety, efficacy, along with a lot of external lab testing on the device to make sure it was safe. Going through the FDA as a 510K device, we got our FDA clearance, and then finally setting up manufacturing, getting production going of the medical device with the FDA clearance, and then on to launch. So those are essentially the highest level phases that we've taken the company through.
Now, you've you've been marketing this exclusively to practitioners, to clinicians. You have expressed a desire. I mean, just thinking about your own personal story, I would imagine that the ideal for you would be a world in which I can go down to my, I don't know, Walgreens or other pharmacy, pick up my own device and bring it home for myself. I don't have to go to a practitioner. Is that right? And if so, what are there additional steps that you've got to go through in order to get there?
Absolutely. That's part of the bigger vision for the company in the future. What we've done so far and what I wanted to start with as a patient going to the clinics for the ear cleaning procedure was I wanted to start there, helping patients, helping clinicians, bringing innovation to a medical procedure that had been forgotten and unchanged, hadn't improved in, frankly, decades. And so when I was a student there at the University of Arizona, needing this procedure myself again, I started doing a lot of research. So I was looking at what maybe a primary care doctor was doing versus a ENT specialist was doing, and everything in between on the spectrum of healthcare. And what I found was very interesting to me. I found that some clinicians were using only irrigation, say with an ear and bladder syringe, pumping water into your ear, allowing it to basically spill out into a kidney basin. So irrigation only was one way of performing the ear cleaning procedure versus, for example, an ENT specialist who would do microsuction, no irrigation. So they would just be going in there with an otoscope, digital otoscope, and suction tools to be pulling out your wax impaction. And what I had realized is no device, no technology was combining both at the same time, irrigation, which what some clinicians were doing, with microsuctions, what specialists were doing. And that's how I combined them into one device, which ended up being the OtoSet Ear Cleaning System. So I wanted to start with a medical device for clinicians to treat their patients at the point of care.
Is that one I see over your shoulder there behind you?
It is. So here is what I came up with. This is our OtoSet Ear Cleaning System. And how it works is it has simultaneous irrigation and suction. So essentially, clean saline solution or distilled water is filled up into the top half of the device there. And then at the push of a button, either left, right, or both ears can actually be cleaned at the same time. And then what the device automatically does is it will introduce all of the irrigation water flow into the patient's ear through an ear tip, while simultaneously suctioning all of that water and earwax back out into the lower chamber, which we call the waste container. And this procedure is fully automated and takes only 30 seconds at controlled pressures and flow rates.
Wow. What is, I mean, I would imagine, as someone who myself came out of the health industry, I know that there's a fair amount of resistance to change. Practitioners kind of like doing things the way they do them. And so what has been the response to this and the uptake relative to sort of the gold standards?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one thing that we found early on when we started SafKan Health was we were approaching a problem that was really significant, both for the clinicians themselves having to perform this procedure. I think the number is around 35 million Americans go to the doctor every single year for this procedure. So it's very common. And it was time consuming and it was troublesome for the clinicians to do themselves with outdated technology. And then as a patient myself, my own experience knowing how painful, uncomfortable, and difficult the procedure was before manually with ear and bladder syringes or manual suction, understanding both the problem from the clinician side and the patient side is what gave me, the unique vision to come up with an innovation like the OtoSet. And so once we were able to build the device prototypes, and then once we were through clinical studies, we worked with the University of Washington to conduct a clinical study here locally in Washington. And once we had clinical data behind the device and gone through the FDA as the first and only ear cleaning device that has FDA clearance, taking all of that bundled together to market, we had a very strong case for our innovative medical device, and the market has picked it up really well.
Wow. So I think it's probably a good moment in time to get at the we in your sentence. You and your brother run this company. I'm going to start though in a little different way. You mentioned already that you were a biomedical engineering major. So did you ever feel like, oh man, I've got this idea, but I can't run a business because I don't have a business background? How did you, one, kind of approach that side of it? And then two, how did your brother come into the picture?
Yeah, so myself, as a biomedical engineer by education, I always had an entrepreneurial spirit and mindset. So I was always, thinking about business ideas, new inventions, innovation, and I basically applied that mindset to the medical device industry. So that leads me to, as we co-founded SafKan Health, Aadil Diwan, my older brother, is our CEO, my co-founder. And around the time where we had prototypes built, we were ready to start clinical studies. That's when we joined forces. And then he led the company forward on the business side, talking to investors, raising our seed round, which got us off the ground and through the FDA. Later came the Series A, which launched us into the market.
Wow. Well, and congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
I know far too many founders who are still trying to, crack into that investment world. So getting through a Series A is wonderful.
Thank you.
So to me, what you're saying is something that we really like to reinforce in Forge, which is that anybody, any background, any major, and for that matter, any age, it can be an entrepreneur. It is not, it's not an exclusive domain. But you also tell a story of solving a really important and personal problem, which I think is the other side of this. Sometimes I run into people who say, well, I want to be an entrepreneur and I'm thinking about doing it in, Bitcoin or cyber. I'm like,
Sure.
So what do you know about it? Oh, I don't know anything about it, but it sounds cool. All right. Maybe focus on something that is really personal to you, that you have a passion for, and that, I'm going to guess, Aadil, that this has not just been a straight line from I have the idea and here we go, investors handing me millions of dollars. Thanks very much. This was like, what are we going to do next week? It has taken probably a great deal of perseverance on your part, maybe even some moments in which you questioned whether or not this was viable and so on. So if you don't mind offering a little bit of that perspective, I think it would be helpful for everybody.
Yeah. So, of course, there have been a number of challenges that required quite a bit of perseverance over the years. Early on, prototyping was not easy. We were doing a lot of 3D printing, which at times could be unreliable, but over time, it proved very helpful for us to get parts iterated on quickly and at an effective cost. So once we got through early prototyping challenges, we put together the technology using the irrigation and suction combined into the wearable headset, as you can see here. Once we had the product prototyped and through clinical studies showing that we had above 90% efficacy and no safety concerns, we went through the FDA for 510(k) clearance as a Class 1 medical device. And that was another significant hurdle. We are actually the first and only FDA cleared ear cleaning device in the world. The FDA had never seen a product so innovative like this before, with irrigation combined with suction. On top of that, being fully automated, all of the pressures and flow rates controlled at the push of a button. And then, of course, wearable into that headset form factor. So it took about 6 to 9 months going through the FDA, some back and forth. But once we got clearance in late 2020, we were ready to go and move forward with our soft launch of the product to clinics across the country in 2021. So it took a lot of perseverance to get through that prototyping phase, through clinical studies, iterating on the technology, on the product, getting it just right, as effective and safe as possible, understanding the FDA process, working with them for all of the regulatory needs being met, culminating in the product launch.
And I mean, had you ever been through this process with the FDA before?
I had not. Everything at this company I was going through for the first time as I started it right out of my college apartment. But I'm very lucky to have a great team around me, starting with my older brother, Sahil, as our CEO leading the company. I've learned a tremendous amount from him, and he's been supportive to me as well. And us together as brothers working, we've been very, very lucky to have industry experts helping us along the way. So we've worked with consultants from the top medical device companies, regulatory advisors formerly with the FDA. So we've been very fortunate in that aspect.
I think that's often the thing that, especially early founders or founders who haven't been down the path, it's probably quite daunting. You know, it's intimidating to think about taking something, and let me assure you, it is. You know, having been down the path with the regulatory pathway for drugs and drug approval, it is an incredible and I will dare say insane amount of data that is required to go through that process. And if you don't have that expertise, here's a really easy tip: find someone who's done this multiple times. And so it sounds like that's exactly what you did, is you went and brought on some really expert advisors to help you through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, listen, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of sacrifice. It's a lot of pain, struggle, tears, and perseverance, as you said, as a founder, to get through this. Of course, you can, you know, work with the best, get as much help as you can. But as a founder, as an inventor, it's on you. And so keeping a positive mindset, always being open to learn. If you don't know, ask questions, figure it out, and never give up.
So speaking of being an inventor, another common question that I get from founders is IP protection, patenting, and so on. What was your approach to it, and how do you now that in retrospect, how do you feel about the timing? Were you pressured to try to move quickly to patent? Do you feel like you waited the right amount of time? Like, tell me a little bit about that IP journey.
Yeah, the IP journey strategically started very early. So I knew when I was building my earliest prototypes that the first thing I needed to do was protect my invention. So I filed the very first provisional patent, I believe, back in 2016, completely written on my own, filed that, got my protection, and then started taking the prototypes and inventions out to our teams, out to investors. And to date, a few years later, we have 3 issued patents in the US and patents filed all over the world.
Wow. That is some audacity on your part to take it forward by yourself and to get the provisional in. But that's great, and I think one of the things that we've tried very hard is to bring together some resources and make those available to students, because that is often the thing that they either haven't thought about and really should, or they know they should do something and they have no idea where to start or where to go for it.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic that you guys are, providing that advice, service, and help to these students with these ideas for innovations, but they don't necessarily know the next steps to protect it. And so that's fantastic. I wish, again, the theme of this is I wish it was around when I was a student.
I'm sorry, I got here as quick as I could, but
Great.
So let's talk a little bit about sort of where you see what's your vision for the future? What would you like to see? I mean, if SafKan is an example, and you already said you were the first of its kind for the FDA to see, well, are there other frontiers? Are there other places that we need collectively to be thinking about? And what drives your fire with that?
Yeah, so my grand vision began with solving this problem, as I mentioned, for patients like myself going to the clinician, whether that's primary care, ENT, or urgent care, for this procedure once they have that conductive hearing loss. Impacted cerumen is causing them a significant issue. They need it removed as soon as possible. So that's the problem I wanted to solve first, and I'm very proud to say that we've done that with the OtoSet Ear Cleaning System. Now, in every major city across America, if you wake up like I did a long time ago with that hearing loss in one or both ears, you can go to a clinic near you and get the procedure done with our OtoSet Ear Cleaning System. So that was my basically phase one, solving that problem. But the grand vision here always has been ear care in general for the general population. And what I see as the company moves forward is not only being a significant innovation in the clinical space in clinics across the country, but also next products working on a more preventative ear care routine for people at home. Because if you talk to people every day, they don't necessarily know how to take care of their ears outside of the doctor's office.
Is this a new frontier thinking about the space where we have, I remember the first time I ever saw Sahil's presentation, and it had that, antiquated, the bulb and like the photos.
Yeah.
Were, I'm sure, intentional, right? To kind of like, this is what we're doing. And it was like, oh, and by the way, that's from how many years ago? Like, it hasn't changed from, something that's borderline
200 years. Yeah.
Are there other places where we should be thinking about this? Are there other outdated procedures that are ripe? And I if you're thinking about them and that's like your next business opportunity, I'm not asking you to give that away, but I'm just kind of curious how you see that.
So I think medical device innovation across the industry is ripe. There's so much to do, and there's a lot of procedures that are a bit outdated, just like the ear cleaning procedure with the ear and bladder syringe that I came across. I would encourage students, young entrepreneurs who are interested in the medical device industry, next time you go to the doctor, next time you're visiting a hospital, take a look around, think about what procedures or devices that are being used on you or around you, and think of what you're learning in school can be applied, and think about ways that technologies that are emerging can be taken out to market to improve those procedures.
So you've just given me another thought, which is we're gonna want to bring you in this summer to talk to the students that are in the student startup residency, and maybe tell them a little bit about your story and what you just described, because I imagine that a lot of students sort of feel like, well, this is territory that's already been farmed, and there's I'm going to have to go this other path. And I think you're illustrating very well that if someone spots a problem, just because there's a treatment for it doesn't mean it's the best one or the best solution. Build a better solution for it.
Absolutely. There's always room for improvement. And in an ever-changing world with new technologies emerging, 3D printing, artificial intelligence, and every piece of medical technology will constantly be evolving and is ripe for innovation.
So closing topic is always advice for students who are currently studying, currently in school? What would be your parting wisdom for them?
So my advice to students today would, of course, be focus on your major, but also take the time to understand different aspects, different majors, whether that's business, engineering, law, finance. Make sure you're well-rounded as an individual, and that will set you up for the best chance of success, whichever path you choose.
Awesome. Well, Aadil, it's been a pleasure to chat with you. It's so funny. I've known about SafKan for so long, and you and I have never had a chance to talk. So I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you today. And I do hope that you can come and be a part of the Forge community. We would absolutely welcome that.
Thank you for having me, Brian. It's been a pleasure, and I absolutely look forward to being more involved in the Forge community.